undisclosed location somewhere in the northern hemisphere, waiting out the alien apocalypse. He is armed with a machete and a microphone. This is the Mysterious Outpost.
Welcome to Mysterious Outpost Radio. This is Mike Blocker, your host for the evening. Tonight on the show, I'm going to have Tim Swartz. He is one of the more requested guests on the show by, of course, my YouTube audience, which is my largest audience so far. And of course, I know I've been getting these requests from you, but this is one of my favorite researchers. I was going to have him on eventually anyways, which too bad I couldn't get him more frequently or earlier. But frequently, he will probably become a more frequent guest, maybe a couple times a year, because he talks about everything under the sun when it comes to mysterious things. And this is a Mysterious Outpost Radio. This is exactly the type of vibe, the type of atmosphere that I want to have with his type of research, everything that he covers. It's awesome. We're going to cover, talk about Hollow Earth, Admiral Byrd, and the JFK assassination connection tonight. And welcome to the show, Tim. How the hell are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you very much for having me on Mysterious Outpost Radio. I really appreciate it.
But what led you down this rabbit hole of searching for the truth and answers and everything else?
Boy, and it is a rabbit hole too. I mean, more than a rabbit hole, it's like a bottomless pit. That's probably a better way to, it's one of these situations, like you're at the top looking down into it. You've seen the, like maybe the cartoons or movies, somebody drops a coin. And it's just you never hear it hit.
Yeah.
And that's and if you get involved in this kind of stuff, that's exactly the way it is. I mean, I've known a lot of people through the years who end up being extremely disappointed because they don't see any, fruition of their research. I mean, I've known a lot of people who, investigated, say, like UFOs from a very early age, and then, basically on their deathbed, they were just like, I have one regret in life, that's I never found out the truth about those damned UFOs. And I tell you something, if you go into this field with that kind of attitude, you probably are going to be very disappointed. Because that's one of the weird things, though, about, say, like UFOs and paranormal phenomena and cryptid creatures and what have you, because it seems like that if you feel like that you are getting close to an answer, then the rules get changed and you find yourself even further away than you were before.
Exactly.
Yeah. But, with me, and like a lot of people who are into this, I got started at a pretty early age. I mean, I was interested in, say, like science and space travel and things like that. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, and I mean that was when you saw, like the Mercury and the Apollo space programs, and landing on the moon, and that was really interesting. But I really didn't have much knowledge about the world of the weird. But one time, and I always say, I think it was in third grade. That's my impression. It would have been like third or fourth grade, but
yeah.
I seem to remember it being third grade. There used to be a thing that Scholastic Books used to put out. It was a once a week newspaper, and now it's. Say the World Weekly News, but that's not it. That was a supermarket tabloid. But it may be called like the Weekly Reader, and it was an aggregate of the week's news stories that were put together, kind of like on a kids level. Well, our teacher would hand out assignments to everybody, once a week that we would have to do a written and oral report on, like a specific, news story. One time, my assignment was based on an article from this little newspaper about UFOs. UFOs being seen in the United States. I had no idea what UFOs were. I could have cared less, actually. I grew up in Indiana. I was more interested in the Indianapolis 500 or the Indianapolis 500. That's what I was interested in. Some kids would say basketball, but no, I'm fast cars. That's what I was interested in. So I did this report, about UFOs, and it almost seems like almost as soon as I was finished with it, that I was pegged. That was what I was. I was the flying saucer guy. I was the guy who believed in flying saucers, and you know how kids are. I mean, they always love to find something on you, and for some reason, that was what I got stuck with. I was the guy who believed in little green men, and I really could have cared less. But as time went by, I noticed something really interesting. People who would go and make fun of you, to your face, and with everybody else around, may come back later and say, I don't believe in this stuff, but. And then they would proceed to tell me a story about how their family saw a UFO over their house, or they saw their dead grandma standing at the foot of their bed, or something like that, and that is what really got me interested in this stuff.
Did you get ridiculed when you were younger? Whenever you did this report on UFOs?
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. And, luck would have it that I was the one that, had to do the report. I mean, you think about it, it's funny how fate sometimes will go and deal you that hand. As a kid, I was just like, oh, man, that just really, that really pissed me off, because here they were making fun of me about something that I really had no interest in. If they were making fun of me, because I liked race cars, then, I could deal with that. But they were making fun of me and ridiculing me about something that I just, at that point I could have cared less about. But it was these stories that these people were coming to tell me. And they were earnest about it, and the majority of them, they weren't interested in telling anybody else. As I got older and was approached more by adults, they're not interested in getting their name in a book or a newspaper or making money off it or something like that. The majority of the time, these people had a weird experience that they had no way to explain it. Because face it, most people, with the exception of, like us and, people listening to this show, most people have no real knowledge about these kind of things. They have no interest in it. So when something weird like that happens to somebody, they don't know how to pigeonhole it. They don't know how to put that experience in their brain to categorize it.
And if they do, they sort of have like a breakdown. A lot of people have breakdowns when they get faced with the truth.
Right. Well, and they have the breakdown because there's no previous experience that they can, file that away, because we all have, things that happen to us, every day, that we categorize those things in our brain. Occasionally we'll have something traumatic happen. You're in a car crash, or you see somebody, maybe accidentally, shot in front of you, or things like that. Well, even then, there is still a somewhat familiar place in your brain that you can put that in. When it comes to weird phenomena, a UFO, somebody seeing a strange creature that they don't understand, even ghostly experiences, they just don't know how to put that away. And then they're afraid that if they tell anybody about their experience, they're going to be laughed at. And that is I mean, yeah, they should be afraid about that because most people will. They'll laugh their heads off when someone tries to explain this odd experience. Even family members will laugh at you and not believe you. I mean, it's
most of my family members, Tim, do not know what I do. Most because like I. Some of my listeners, of course, I told you that, I live in Louisiana. This is the Bible Belt. Right. And you get ridiculed, you get laughed at. And, of course, there's a lot of Christians, that's around here that will say that you're going to hell for even fathom the idea of extraterrestrials, UFOs, government secrets, or whatever it is.
Exactly. And that is really what got me interested in all this, is the fact that not so much that people were seeing these things, but, well, let me back up a little bit. Okay. People are seeing weird things. They don't know how to explain it. So, it's interesting that they're seeing weird things. And this is the part that a lot of times I always kind of choke on, because it can be kind of hard to explain to somebody that, okay, yeah, people see weird things. There are odd things that happen at least once in everybody's lifetime. Sometimes they have it more, and it's the way that people react to these experiences that to me have been extremely interesting. And once somebody will tell me their story, it's almost like you can see the weight lifted off of their shoulders, because I don't laugh at them, I don't judge them, I don't even try to offer them an explanation, even though some people do. They try to ask me, what do you think this means? And and I'm very frank with them. It's like, I don't know. I guarantee you that the experience that you had was probably real, and that you're going to have to deal with that, but it's not the end of the world. You had a strange experience. Lots of people have had strange experiences like this. Consider yourself special, even though a lot of people, they don't consider themselves special. A lot of people, it's like you said before, they will actually develop almost like a neurosis, about it, because a lot of them become obsessed trying to find a meaning behind it. And I'll tell them, I said, stop trying to find a meaning behind it, because you're not going to find one. You may eventually find something that you can take some comfort in, but then next week something else may happen that's going to throw that all completely out of perspective again. So just accept what happened to you and deal with it, but you're not crazy. That's another thing that people always ask me. Am I crazy? Is this am I is this a mental breakdown that I'm having? Because my great uncle Fred came to me and told me that his will was hidden up in the chimney, and then they went and looked, and there it was. And it's like, no, of course you're not crazy. But everybody else said I was crazy. I said, well, okay, first of all, quit telling everybody else. It's especially unless you know that they are open-minded enough to listen to you and not laugh and not judge. Because people are so fond of judging others about their experiences. And of course, you see these skeptics, especially in the UFO fields, who will, most of these guys are armchair skeptics too. That's what really honks me on, is that they'll
keyboard warriors.
Yes. Well, a lot of these guys, they're pretty well-known writers too, and yet they will go and dismiss, say, like an airline pilot who had like an unusual visual experience with a UFO while they were up in the air. And you have these guys who are like, oh well, just because this guy's an airline pilot, doesn't mean that he is a what's I'm trying to think of now what the word. There was a term that somebody used, like a good a viewer, like able to make a good judgment
Yeah.
on what they saw, just because he's an airline pilot. And it's just like, no, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about a guy who has spent like 20 years flying planes, probably has seen every kind of unusual natural aerial phenomena out there. And for you to say that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about because he's not a good viewer, so yeah, I'm sorry, but people love to judge and say, oh well, you're crazy, or you don't, you didn't see what you thought you see. And that doesn't really, to me, that doesn't matter. Because these people are, they think that they saw something, and I'm not going to be the one that goes and tells them, oh well, you probably just saw a coat hanging in your closet just because that coat looked like it had glowing red eyes and was reaching out to get you. Just ignore that part.
Well, Tim, well, the moral of the story to the audience: do not judge. Because
yes.
but anyways, let's go ahead and skip forward a little bit, Tim. Okay, of course, like I told you, we're going to tie in the Hollow Earth, Admiral Byrd, JFK, and also with these JFK files. So what's your take on these files that have come to surface over the past few weeks?
Well, like the UFO files that have been released, both in the United States, especially other countries, like Canada and Great Britain and France, like that. I sincerely doubt if we are seeing, like really the cream of the crop of files that have been held by the FBI and the CIA and everybody else. Anything probably that would really have any answers or any pertinent information probably has long since disappeared. It's been chucked away into a blast furnace someplace, or shredded, or both at the same time. Now some of the stuff that's come out so far is interesting, but really a lot of it, if you look closely enough, has been circulating amongst the Kennedy assassination researchers for quite a while.
Exactly, and that's what Michael Sala said earlier today when I had him on my show. But just because I asked him about the JFK files, because I wasn't sure if it was anything new with the JFK files. This is off New York Post. The JFK files show informant told CIA Hitler was living in Colombia. And that's kind of been circulating amongst this community for a while. But we were told Argentina, I believe. What's your take on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, that the picture that went along with that, I saw that very same picture about a year ago about an article. Going along the same lines, and don't forget, who was it? Was the History Channel had a series called, what was it, like Looking for Hitler or something like that, and I think they're coming back even for a third season, where they were using already declassified FBI and CIA documents, but as well they were using documents that were from, say, like Israel and other countries like that. This information is hardly new, and of course a lot of this falls into the whole Admiral Byrd mystery about Hitler surviving and other Nazis, of course, surviving the end of the war and possibly fleeing to either Antarctica or South America or things like that. So yes, I mean these documents are interesting, but I don't really think that anybody is going to uncover anything, that smoking guns.
Is this one you? Is this one you, Tim? Well, maybe not, because I never read the Project Northwoods, all of the documents, just certain parts about how they're very reminiscent of 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
But this is off USA Today. JFK files how the CIA planned to murder Castro using mafia and poison pills.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, and they also kicked around the idea to kill people in Miami. Not Cuban refugees, but just people in general, and then blame it on Cuba. In order to justify attacking Cuba, like not just the Bay of Pigs scenario, but an actual full blown, dropping bombs and sending in a lot of troops. And as well, I mean, Northwoods, one of the ideas was to maybe take down a couple of airlines, civilian airlines, blame it on the Cubans, maybe do a situation where, say, like a small Navy vessel would be attacked, and then blame that on Cuba. So yeah, I mean, and the whole attempts to assassinate Castro. I mean, we've seen that. Those stories
exactly. They are acting like this is really new because this was posted yesterday off of Washington Post. Pretty much the same thing I just read on USA Today's article. This is off Washington Post. What the JFK assassination files can tell us about the U.S. plot to kill Castro. Come on now. This is read the Northwoods documents.
Well, the thing about it is you have seen these very same stories being bandied about for years by and we'll put quotation marks around this, conspiracy writers, conspiracy theorists. Nobody takes them seriously. So now that you have access, or at least easier access, because a lot of these documents have been declassified and released one way or another over the years. I think the difference is that some of these some of the names that had been redacted before are now have now been uncovered, but nobody took like these earlier researchers seriously, because they were fringe writers. So now you have like you said, the Washington Post, USA Today. You've got assignment editors who are like, giving this assignment, saying, okay, go through this stuff, find something interesting. And a lot of these reporters have no idea about the history, the background of other people's writings. I mean, a good example would be the late Jim Marrs.
Yes.
Who wrote about this kind of stuff and did extensive research. I mean, he wrote that Crossfire, right? And so you have a lot of these reporters now, and a lot of them have no idea. I mean, they're just looking at this information like it's just brand new stuff, and to them it is brand new stuff. But for the rest of us who've been around for a while, we're just like, yeah, well, tell us something new.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess before we move forward a little bit, do you think? Well, first off, two-part question: has all these files been released? Are they holding some back?
Well, yeah, I mean, we definitely know that they're holding some back, because I mean they've actually said that a number of these documents have to be gone through again to make sure that anybody whose names that are mentioned in these documents, if they're still alive, that information has to be redacted, which is a good excuse.
And a part of the two-part question, I don't mean to cut you off, Tim, was, okay, the ones that are being held back, if they do release them, if they do, do you think that they will reveal that Oswald was just an informant of the FBI, or that George Bush was actually there on a CIA operation in Dallas that day? Will they reveal anything like this?
Nope, I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. Like I said before, any kind of information that is going to have any, definitive answers has long since disappeared. I mean, I think that, we already know, because there's been, again, going back to people like Jim Marrs, there's been some really excellent people who have done this research over the years. We already know that it was basically a coup d'etat, and that there was more than one gunman involved, and probably, Lee Harvey Oswald, he may have been involved, he may have been one of the shooters, but he definitely was set up to be the fall guy. And but I don't think that, unless somebody comes across something that, was squirreled away, in an archive somewhere and forgotten about, and then it's just, accidentally discovered, those kinds of definitive answers we'll probably never see in our lifetime, and probably never ever.
Okay, let's move forward, Tim, I want to talk a little bit about, of course, Admiral Byrd, the Hollow Earth. We're going to bring Antarctica into the picture and probably talk more about JFK. So for to the few that are unfamiliar with Admiral Byrd, give us a brief rundown, a bio of Admiral Byrd.
Well, Admiral Byrd was probably one of the last great adventurers. By the time that he was living, which would have been basically in the early 20th century, a lot of the world had already been explored and discovered, or at least the parts of the world that we could actually get to. We still can't get to the deepest levels of the ocean or things like that. But you still had some areas on the planet, the Arctic and the Antarctic regions especially, were still pretty much unexplored and unmapped. And Admiral Byrd, from a very early age, had not only a fascination with exploration and exploration in these areas, but he also had a fascination with airplanes. And that's one of the things that people don't quite realize about Byrd, is that he got his pilots. He learned to fly very early on in a time when planes still pretty much look like kites with propellers. So not only did he turn out to be the kind of like this Indiana Jones of the Arctic and Antarctic regions, but he also was a pretty good pilot. Even though as he got older, he and did some of his expeditions. He let other people pilot these aircrafts. But in his early days, he was a pilot. He attempted at one point and actually succeeded later on, but he attempted to do one of these flying across the Atlantic Ocean by himself, like Charles Lindbergh. But he wasn't successful in his first attempt, and then after Lindbergh did it, then he did it as well. So he became involved, in the Navy, in the military, and had a pretty successful career along those lines, and because of his abilities in the military and as well as his knowledge of flight, he was able to secure funding a number of times to lead expeditions, usually expeditions involving aircraft, other times naval expeditions to the Arctic and especially the Antarctic. He spent an entire winter one time by himself in the Antarctic, and almost died in the process, not from freezing, but because of the little base that he had established there. His stove was pumping out carbon monoxide into the air, and he almost didn't make it. And I can't remember offhand now. Now that I brought this up, whether or not he realized what was going on, or if he just was able to leave just in time. And then later when he was having his medical exam and they drew blood out of him, they were like, "Oh my, man alive! There's a man alive here."
So Tim, where's the? I guess. To skip forward just a little bit with Admiral Byrd, I guess who was pulling the strings behind him? Was there a force, I don't know, you could call it many names, the deep state, the deep cabal, the elite? Was somebody trying to help push him on this voyage to Antarctica and start this Operation Highjump? If there are the elite behind this pushing Admiral Byrd to Antarctica, did they know something was there? Did they have suspicion that something was there?
Well, okay. First of all, I think one of the reasons that Byrd was chosen to command Operation Highjump was just because he was one of the few men who had actual experience down there. And and he was so well known, before World War II. Even though the Nazis at that time were the political power in Germany, and this would have been in the early 1930s, the Germans actually asked Admiral Byrd if he would command one of their expeditions to Antarctica. But and that's the question that everyone wants to know about Operation Highjump is what was the reason for it. And the official explanations was that this was an exploratory mission, that this was going to be something that they were going to look for, possible minerals, valuable minerals that could be used for the newly emerging world power of the United States. Another reason was given was that this was going to be a very good training exercise for soldiers to in the event that, say, the Soviet Union tried to invade the United States by coming over, say like the Arctic region, coming across Siberia or Alaska or something like that, and then coming down to Canada. And of course, a lot of people point out, well, if that's the case, and it would have been a lot cheaper, why didn't you just go up into Alaska and Canada, to do this? Why go all the way down to the bottom of the planet? Spend probably millions of dollars doing this when you could have done it a lot quicker and a lot cheaper. And of course, they was like, oh well, if we did it up, did Alaska and Canada, then that might have honked off the Soviets. We didn't want to do that. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a good explanation.
So Operation Highjump, Tim, was between 46 and 47, correct? This is another two-part question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So, of course.
Let me point out, right after the end of World War II. I mean, World War II had just basically ended.
And this is where I'm trying to get. Of course, after World War II, the German scientists during Operation Paperclip came over around that time too, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's you're talking about somewhat of a similar time period. Yes, go on.
And so I guess, of course, now I'm about to start getting speculative. I just want to get your take because, this is just fun talk. Of course, we can't prove most of this, what I'm about to say, but what about the ones that's pulling the strings, the elite? Of course, they want to bring in the top-notch scientists from Germany. And because there have been rumors of a secret space program that's been going on secretly for quite some time, and that they are trying to work towards this breakaway civilization. So what if that they used, of course, Nazi scientists to help further the advancement in technology, and also that with all this work, they wanted to kind of go into space, and maybe they knew of the Van Allen belt. And maybe one way to break past the Van Allen belt was going south, where the poles, where Antarctica is. Give me your take on that.
Oh well, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, in the early days before we had a better understanding of properly shielding our spacecraft, the only safe way was to go through those low band areas in the north and south poles, and that's an interesting question that you made. I think you're the first one that's ever asked me about that before. Myself, from the research that I have done, I think that probably one of the major reasons for Operation Highjump was the fact that you had a number of Nazi submarines give themselves up in South America. And when the captains of these submarines were debriefed, they basically said that, this was not our, like our first stop. We left, say, I think a lot of them had left South Africa and had taken personnel and material to an undisclosed location in Antarctica. And then after that mission was done, we were instructed to give ourselves up in South America. And I think then that the rumor mill had already been circulating as well, that you had possibly, a scientist, leading Nazi generals.
Are we talking about base?
Leaders,
are we talking about base 211?
Yeah. If you want to give it that name, I've tried to track that down, and I've kind of reached a roadblock. I just wonder if maybe somebody just at one point just made that name up.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, we can call it that, for one of a better name. But yeah, and that there was also, there was also talk, even at that early stage, that the Nazis had developed some kind of superior aircraft. Of course, they weren't calling them, flying disc or flying saucers or anything like that. There's some kind of highly high technology aircraft, and that which the Soviet Union hadn't gotten a hold of and taken away, that a lot of it had managed to make its way to South America. And so I think that one of the major reasons then for Operation Highjump, and again, like I said before, this was after the end of World War II. A lot of ships in the Navy were already being decommissioned, and suddenly they turn around and fire these ships back up, bring a lot of these Navy men back onto duty. And you have to remember, Operation Highjump, this was a massive mission. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was hundreds of ships, an aircraft carrier, a submarine, several thousand men involved in this operation. I mean, there was so much material and men involved. I just find it hard to believe that this was just a training exercise or some kind of exploratory, mission looking for, valuable rocks. They were looking for something, and Admiral Byrd was brought in because he was familiar with Antarctica. He knew the locations that you could go to that were relatively ice-free this time of the year, because they went down, it would have been, winter in the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere, it was the beginning of the summer there. So, I mean, he knew where to go.
And with this being a big operation, sorry to cut you off again, Tim.
No, go ahead.
With this being a big operation, just like you stated, lots of research into this, lots of course, money, just a lot of manpower. Do you think that the intelligence aspect, someone knew that this could possibly be where Atlantis was? What's your thoughts on that?
Atlantis, that is more of a like a modern theory. That's
or some other type of advanced civilization possibly there.
I just, the Nazis were extremely interested in going to Antarctica because they were looking for evidence, not only there but other places as well, like Tibet, for the possible entranceway to underground civilizations that they felt may be like the master race, the true Aryans, the true root race of the the pure white people of the planet. I don't know. There some people like Nick Redfern has done some really good research on documents, FBI, CIA documents from around that period. But I don't think he's ever run across anything that specifically mentions Operation Highjump looking for a lost civilization.
Yeah.
I think that they were looking for a civilization that they already knew existed. They were looking for a Nazi base. And again, the Nazis may have been down there looking for a lost civilization, but the United States, they thought they just thought the Nazis were nutsy cuckoo along those lines, looking for especially not only were they trying to seek this master underground race, but they were also trying to get a hold of like a sacred religious objects, like the sphere of Christ and things like that. I don't know about the Ark of the Covenant. I think that was just Indiana Jones, but along those lines. And intel had gotten back to the United States, about the Nazis looking for this stuff, and over the Allies, they were just like, what? That's just nuts. But we do know now that the Nazis were very interested in this whole occult technology and trying to gain knowledge of mystic powers and things like that.
And there's no telling what's underneath that ice too. There's no telling.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's just it. Now that we have like these the amazing abilities with satellites, actually, do radar underneath the ice. I mean, we're seeing some very interesting things, and it's with after World War II, there has been speculation from some researchers that the whole legend of Atlantis or some other antediluvian civilization, may have been located in Antarctica before it actually moved, to its rather unpleasant location. But I think that when it came to Operation Highjump, they had a specific goal in mind, and it wasn't looking for Atlantis.
Where does the Hollow Earth fit into the picture? Because does that have any connection with Operation Highjump and or the Nazis going there as well?
Well, I mean, gosh, this is one of these stories that, I mean, it goes off in all kinds of different directions, Mike, because You've got the British actually before Operation Highjump, they sent an expedition to Antarctica because they had heard the same thing, that there was a Nazi base there that their intel has said that they were using this area to regroup and to help supply bastions in South America, and vice versa. So the Great Britain sent a relatively small exploratory mission there, and supposedly they found the remnants of this base in a cavern system located in the side of a mountain that was relatively warm, as it was being fed, warmed by like volcanic vents. But that any Germans that had been there were gone for some reason. They never could find out whether or not something had happened to it. According to these stories, it was just like everybody just dropped what they were doing and either got the hell out or were taken away. Which that may have been one of the basis for why then Operation Highjump was put together. So this was one of the first stories about say like the Hollow Earth or underground caverns associated with Admiral Byrd. You also have this book that has been around for a long time. Tim Beckley's Global Communications has had it in print for a long time, and there was a secret diaries of Admiral Byrd, and this actually, it probably first emerged sometime in the 60s, I would say. And it was probably one of these books that, people would just keep copying it down through like Xerox machines if they had those available to them. But, mimeograph, anything like, they called them, like samizats, which is like a Russian term for copying and recopying documents that are considered by the government dangerous, and so like underground elements, and what I mean, underground, I mean political underground elements would copy these things and spread them around to others. And the Secret Diaries of Admiral Byrd talks about a flight, an expedition that Admiral Byrd did with a pilot to fly over the North Pole. And it basically is a step-by-step description of what happened to him and this pilot, that they had a run-in with flying saucers that had Nazi emblems on them, that these saucers basically took control of their plane and then took them into a vast opening in the North Pole, and took them to an underground city where they met with, say, like a great master, like one of these guys that the Nazis who supposedly have been looking for, and they were given a lecture on how we've now just discovered atomic weapons up here in the surface, and that they can't allow us to just go and freely bomb the hell out of each other, and if we persist with all that they were going to step in and stop us. And then Byrd and his pilot were escorted back out again and set free. The curious thing about this story is that according to this diary, the same time that this took place, Byrd was actually involved in Operation Highjump on the other side of the planet. He wasn't in the Arctic area, he was in the Antarctic. So it's been my theory from my research that possibly the Secret Diary of Admiral Byrd may have been put out kind of as almost a disinformation campaign, that it would be circulated amongst, like the fringe elements, UFO, enthusiasts, people like that, to distract from the information that was starting to slowly come out about Operation Highjump, which really started in the 1960s. I don't believe that Byrd actually was in the North Pole and went into the hollow Earth. Instead, he was part of an even more secret mission there in Antarctica. And part of the reasons that I think that is that the story sounds suspiciously like a lot of these stories that were coming from the early contactees, like George Adamski and Howard Benger and people like that. I mean, it's just almost verbatim the same kind of information that these underground people gave Byrd, that these so-called Space Brothers were given to Adamski and Howard, and the other contactees from the Space Brothers. So it's to me it's very interesting because the whole thing about disinformation campaign is that you mix in a little truth, you mix in a little fake stuff, and you just kind of stir it around a little bit till nobody knows for sure just what exactly is going on. And the whole idea is that most people will just read it and say, oh, well, that's just all bull crap. And so anything that comes out that would actually be legitimate would get lumped in with that. And also declared bull crap. So that anything that came out about Operation Highjump, I think, would end up getting lumped in with this, the secret diaries of Admiral Byrd, and it's just like, oh well, that's just made up stuff. It's just.
So, and you're exactly right, Tim. So, I guess when pictures, are there any type of photographic proof of the Hollow Earth, or anything maybe similar? Drawings, maybe.
Well, you've if you go on the internet, boy, you'll find all kinds of supposedly, like satellite photos now taken of like the polar openings, because starting in the 19th century, the theory started that there were actually openings, like huge openings in the North and South Pole that would enable you to gain access to the hollow Earth. It's and I can't, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, that's not true, or yeah, that is true, because I've never been there. I've never flown. I mean, I've come, I've been on, naturally flights that have gone over the polar, regions, going from one country to another, and I saw ice and rocks and water and things like that. I never saw any polar openings, but that's not to say that they're not there. I doubt it, though. Go ahead.
So if they're okay. I might be asking you to speculate again. So just give me your wildest theory about the Hollow Earth. Like, let's say that, of course, a lot of this is speculation, of course, trying to have these conversations to maybe actually find bits and pieces of truth. That's according to, that's why there's so much research that's being done with this type of genre. But give me your wildest theory on the Hollow Earth. Like, what, if there is a Hollow Earth, exactly? What exactly is in the Hollow Earth?
Sure. Well, the stories go that the actual crust of the planet is maybe no more than, say, 500, 600 miles thick. All right. and that the Earth is basically kind of like an eggshell, with no yolk or or white stuff inside. That it's actually hollow inside, and that there is a small sun held by gravity in the center of this hollow area that perpetually lights the interior of the planet. And that due to, I suppose, that the way like planets form, say you have gravitational whirlpools around the sun where matter coalesces and spins in an orbit, and so you would have basically most of the lighter material forming a surface, a layer, and then the interior, all the heavier elements would condense together to form kind of like a sun. You have somebody like Brooks Agnew, who is a very, very intelligent man. I mean, and he speculates that if there is a small sun in the center of the hollow Earth, that it's not, you're not looking at, say, a celestial object that is composed of plasma being fired by nuclear fission, but instead could possibly be like a nickel and steel compressed together to such a point that the radiation involved is what produces the light and heat from it. And of course, this is just like you said, is the speculation.
Yeah.
Now, other people have said that the interior of the planet is actually much like the surface. That there are land masses and water and animals and people and and things like that with a breathable atmosphere. For listeners who would like probably a better description, look for Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar series of books. Edgar Rice Burroughs, the guy who wrote all the Tarzan books.
Yeah.
He wrote a series of books about the hollow Earth and the land underneath called Pellucidar, and they're naturally, they're pulp adventure books, but he goes to great lengths in describing how this land could exist, and the types of people that live underneath. I mean, going as far as to saying that because there is a sun in the center, that how is it going to how could there be any night? There's no night because the sun doesn't rise or set, so it's just a perpetual daylight down there. Excellent series of books, just a lot of fun to read.
I'll try to give links in the description below, but to skip forward, to just wind things down for this time, just like I told you before the show, Tim, I'm going to have you on to be one of my most frequent guests, because you talk about and research about so many things. But to go back to Admiral Byrd, you may know where this is going. One of your friends, I'm not going to say any names, one of your friends told me to ask you about the Admiral Byrd and the JFK assassination.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, and this is actually an excellent chapter from our book, Secret Exploits of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, The Hollow Earth, Nazi Occultism, Secret Societies, and the JFK Assassination. Myself, Tim Beckley, Tim Crindlin, Sean Castile, Micah Hanks, Richard Toronto, Diane Robbins. I mean, we all contributed parts to this book. Well, Tim Crindlin, who is actually known as Zamora the Torture King, who does this absolutely fantastic, a magic act I mean, it's not magic. I mean, he goes and actually, pierces his body and does other kinds of just, these absolutely fantastic things. But he's done a lot of research along these lines, and it just so happens that, Admiral Byrd had a cousin by the name of David Harold Byrd. Now, Harold Byrd actually made a bunch of money in Texas oil. And in fact, Harold actually helped fund some of Byrd's polar expeditions before the government took over. And now Harold, because of his wealth and where he was located in Texas, he was part of an inner circle of Texas oil men called the 8F Group, which was an elite organization named after the room number of the Lamar Hotel in Houston, where they held meetings. Now, this group also had Lyndon Johnson and Governor John Connally as part of this group. So, one of the highly unusual things about Harold Byrd is that he was the owner of the Texas Book Depository, where, as we know, Oswald allegedly took his shots at Kennedy from. Now, Harold had owned this building, oh my gosh, since I think 1938, 39, something like that. So, I mean, he had this building for quite a while. And of course, a lot of the people who were involved in this Texas right-wing organization have been implicated over the years as possibly being part of the JFK assassination, conspiracy. Mm-hmm. One of the things is that conveniently, Harold Byrd was like one of the few people not in Dallas on the day that Kennedy was shot. He actually was on a safari expedition in Africa with Jim Doolittle. And just very conveniently, just happened to be there, and feigned shock. I guess he returned in January, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Lyndon Johnson's president of the United States? How could this happen?" But because of Kennedy being assassinated and Johnson now being president, Harold and found himself the benefactor of a lot of business dealings and things like that, coming from the very same people that have been implicated over the years.
Was there a lot of money in the Byrd family?
Well, on that side, it was. Now, Admiral Byrd, I mean, being a military man, I mean, he had a modest income. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, when it came to Harold Byrd, because of his oil money, he got quite a bit. Now, one weird thing is that after Byrd returned from Africa, he had the window that Oswald allegedly shot Kennedy from removed from the Texas Book Depository and kept it as a souvenir in the banquet room of his mansion. He decorated the bottom half of the window with newspaper clippings of the assassination, postcards of Dealey Plaza and things like that. And I'm just giving, really just kind of a basic summary here, because there was also some connections with Byrd and the strip club that was run by Jack Ruby, who would then go on to kill Oswald in the Dallas police station. And so, I mean, there was very interesting.
He was probably friends with the Bushes too, because they were part, in that oil field business as well.
Oh yes. Well, I mean, yeah, President Bush, who was also the director of CIA at one point. He was part of that same club. It has not gone unnoticed over the years that the majority of the people who were part of this right-wing Texas Oil Club, seem to have their fingers in this same pie. The curious thing, of course, is that Governor John Connally was also a part of this group. Yet he ended up getting shot as well. So, it's speculating, of course, whether or not he had a falling out, or if he just happened to be, inadvertently in the line of fire. Seems to me, and don't quote me on this. It seems to me, though, that he was supposed to be riding in another vehicle as part of that, that group of cars that went through a Dealey Plaza. And of course, I also need to point out that the route that took them through Dealey Plaza had been kept secret. It wasn't until the very last moment, like maybe an hour or so beforehand, that anybody knew that they were going to be going through that area. They were supposed to go a different route, but they actually had to take this kind of weird turn into Dealey Plaza, where the conditions were just absolutely perfect for a gunman to be hidden in several areas. I mean, not only the Texas bookstore depository, but on that overpass nearby, and of course the grassy knoll.
And that's going to round things up for this time. And I tell you what, the rabbit hole, it keeps getting deeper and deeper. The more you look at this, Tim, it's just mind-boggling how everything is so interconnected, and it's like the spider webs just keep interconnecting with each other. And it's like the further you go down the rabbit hole, it's like the more questions you get, because it's like it's just the ever-ending journey of questions. But the thing is, we're not part of the indoctrinated, or the people that's listening to this show. You're not, I'm not. We're not part of the indoctrinated that believe everything what modern academia says, what Washington, D.C. says, what the law says. So I guess you can say that we have more of an open mind. And I know that we don't have all the answers, but I definitely salute you, and I salute everybody that listens to the show and that's in this type of research and that has an open mind. Because, just like we were talking about earlier, you do get ridiculed, and you do get, bullied, name called, and everything else for even fathoming this type of the things that we've been talking about the past hour. But anyways, Tim, I appreciate your time, and I do salute you, man.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I had a great time today, and I hope your listeners enjoyed this as well.
Yes, sir, and stay there. And that is Tim Swartz. Go to his website, conspiracyjournal.com. I'll give the links to everything in the description below. And like I always say, until next time, keep truthing and have a good one.